Senior Fellow. Victor, it is great to see you. I know you've been out traveling. I've been reading all of your great essays and columns. So let's start with this. The experts are always wrong. And let's start with the trade thing. You mentioned it. I know we have a lot of ground to cover. But the experts are, there's no trade retaliation. There's no trade war. All that stuff is wrong. The stock market's going up big time. There's no recession. There's no inflation. It's like they missed every single part of this story, Victor.
Yeah, I think we're into new frontier, Larry, we've never been before. We don't know at what rate of profit our foreign policy, our foreign partners are racking up these surpluses. Apparently, if it's a moderate 10 to 15% tariff, they can eat that without jacking up prices and pricing themselves out of this lucrative consumer market. So, and I don't think any of the experts ever counted on that. There's things that are going on in progress, Larry, that we've never seen before. We don't know the economic ramifications when people in the administration say there may be $10 trillion to $15 trillion in new foreign investment. The entire market capitalization of Silicon Valley is only $9 trillion. That's a lot. So we're talking about numbers we've never really encountered, and that's besides the big, beautiful bill, taxes on remittances worldwide, taxes on endowments. So there's all sorts of new developments. I don't think the experts have expertise. We don't know the ramifications economically when the Department of Interior or the EPA say they're going to lessen the red tape from a 2-year application process for a permit down to 21 days, or what the ramifications are of 1 million self-deportations, many of whom are on public assistance. So I think we're just in completely new territory that the economists thought they were familiar with, and they weren't.
You know, Victor, on all this, the experts were not bashful only a few years ago in telling us what a great idea it was for Joe Biden to spend $5 or $6 trillion, and that inflation would be only temporary or transitory, and to $2 trillion of deficits each year, as far as the eye can see, wouldn't be a bother to anybody. They weren't bashful on that, but it's just odd to me with respect to Mr. Trump's quite sensible reciprocal trade policy to have a more balanced world trading system, which has been broken for decades at the expense of the U.S. They jumped out on that, and they got the first one wrong, and they got the second one wrong. They're like, go for two on this. But one, it seems to me there's a liberal left bias here, and there's an anti-Trump bias here, Victor.
Yeah, I live in a rural area, and a farmer came up to me not long ago, and he said, I don't understand it. If surpluses are bad and tariffs are bad, why do our partners all want to have surpluses and tariffs except us?
Yes, yes.
So, I mean, it was kind of common sense, but they were wrong on the border. They said it would not be resolved unless we had comprehensive immigration reform. They were wrong on the 45,000 short military recruits. They said people are obese, they're on drugs, they're on gangs, there's too much competition. No, it was just the messaging that alienated certain people who like to serve in combat units. So again and again, the economic experts, the diplomatic experts, the military experts, they've never seen a counter-revolution like this that's addressing social, economic, diplomatic, military matters all at once. And I think they get confused. And that's the charitable view, Larry. Maybe they're just so obsessed that the ends of damaging Donald Trump justify the means of achieving it, and they are not analytical or disinterested. Well,
the experts are telling us that Mr. Trump was going to do away with NATO. We would walk out of NATO. But instead, he left the meeting with a 5% of GDP defense commitment from NATO. The experts also were wrong. If we ever did anything to Iran directly, it would cause certainly a Middle Eastern war and maybe World War III. Now, they were wrong about all. The Iranian thing, to me, was almost unpardonable. What we did was exactly the right thing to do. B-2s, we didn't get involved, no boots on the ground. We destroyed their nuclear capacity for who knows for how many years. So far, I don't see World War III. What I see is basically a beaten Iran, and we backed Israel through the whole thing. Everything they said about that story, really, I'm going to say, you know, these various groups, foreign relations groups, it was about Trump. If Trump did it, it had to be bad, all right? But if Biden stood around and appeased them, it had to be good. They were wrong on all those counts, Victor.
And don't forget the more pernicious manifestations, the Russian collusion hoax of John Brennan
yes.
and James Clapper that ate up 22 months of the first term, are the worst, the most egregious of 51 intelligence authorities that armed Joe Biden to tell a lie on the eve of the last debate of 2020 and may have affected that election. So there are experts that do even worse things than be wrong about the economy or immigration.
Well, I was coming to that. Okay, so you got there before I did, which is great. So you know what we're learning here. As the release of the classified materials and revisiting this whole issue, there was a lot of lying going on. Now, former President Obama may be immune. Okay, he owes, in a sense, a debt of thanks to Donald Trump for getting the Supreme Court to take him off any criminal immunity. But the point is, his top national security people, the whole crowd, Brennan, Comey, all of them, Clapper, they're going to have to lawyer up because they're in trouble because they lied before Congress. You can't lie before Congress, right? That is a big problem.
No.
And they're not going to, the lawyers, whatever. No. Now, there has to be accountability here, but I'm going to say it again, too. The so-called experts, which in this case was the bulk of the media, not all the media, there's a great conservative media, but the liberal media, the mainstream media, and so forth, Main Street people in the foreign policy game, bought into the Steele dossier, which was phony as a $3 bill, bought into the idea that there was a Russian gate, a Russian hoax, even bought into the idea that Hunter Biden's was Russian disinformation when the FBI had the computer a year ahead of time. I mean, I don't know how you classify that, Victor, but that's got to be part of this story.
Yeah, and it's present tense. They're still doing it. I made a thought experiment. I looked at CNN and MSNBC, and I was shocked the people they brought on. Andrew McCabe weighed in. He lied 4 times to federal investigators and was fired. James Comey weighed in. He lied, basically claimed amnesia 245 times under oath. James Clapper admitted that he was a guest. He was angry. He said he's lawyering up. He lied and said he gave the least untruthful answer. John Brennan lied about the Senate staff surveillance when he was CIA director and predators. And then they had Susan Rice. She lied about Bo Bergendahl. She lied about WMD in Syria. She lied about Benghazi. And then they just bring in these people on that have no credibility, and we're supposed to they just keep regurgitating collusion, disinformation, and they have no credibility at all. And it's quite amazing that they don't get discredited and are shamed into silence, but they're not. They're just double down. Before
I lose you, Victor Davis Hanson, it's such a pleasure. I want to talk about the culture for a second. The experts are wrong. You know, DEI was not popular. Affirmative action is not popular. Anti-Semitism is not popular. It's odd, isn't it? As soon as Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth laid the law down, authorized by President Trump, we now have breaking records on military recruitment. Breaking records. The country does not want an obsession with trans. The country does believe that men should not participate in women's basketball, et cetera, et cetera. There's a cultural revolution going on here, too, that these so-called lefty mainstream experts completely missed.
Absolutely. And when you look at the universities, they all said they wouldn't cut a deal, but they had so much exposure that the public didn't know about. They were gouging on surcharges on grants. They had segregated dorms de facto, separate racial graduations. Anti-Semitism was institutionalized. And boy, they're afraid. And now they're looking at taxes on endowment, 15% ceiling on surcharges. That's going to cost a lot of these elite universities $200-300 million a year out of their operating budget, and that may mean that they can't afford these DEI commissars. And I don't think they will be able to afford them, even though they'll try to hide it. But it's just an expense now that they can't carry.
You know, my last one. The experts are wrong in one other very big area. The experts are wrong because they didn't think Trump would follow through with his campaign promises. Promises made, promises kept, going after the deep state, transforming Washington. And they were wrong about that, Victor. He's done it. He is at, and it's only 6 months worth. We're just starting.
I know, Larry. They had 93 indictments. They told us he'd be in jail by now. They told us that 25 states would get him off the ballot.
Right.
They told us we were going to find all these documents at Mar-a-Lago that we didn't find. Everything they said was going to happen didn't turn out. Anything they tried to do to destroy him just made him stronger.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, if people want to read the truth with good forecasting, they should read your columns. Victor Davis Hanson, it's wonderful to see you, sir. Thanks for helping us out.